Grenada, October 25th, 1983. The night exploded in bursts of orange and white. Captain James Brennan pressed his back against the concrete wall, feeling the vibrations of mortar fire shake through his spine like electricity through copper wire. Around him, 6 Marines crouched in the darkness, their faces painted black, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that no amount of training could fully erase. They were pinned down 300 yards from the compound, enemy fire coming from every angle. Brennan was 35 years old, a 14-year veteran who had survived 2 tours the Corps didn't officially acknowledge, and 3 more that they did. He had a daughter back home in North Carolina. Alexis, 21 years old, pre-med at Chapel Hill, smart as hell, and stubborn as her mother had been before the cancer took her. He carried Alexis's photo in his left breast pocket, tucked behind the Kevlar plate that was supposed to stop bullets. Tonight, it would not be enough. "Captain, we're cut off," Corporal Davies shouted over the chaos, his voice cracking like dry wood. "Air support's 20 minutes out. We don't have 20 minutes. Brennan closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, he ran through every tactical option he had learned at Quantico, every field manual he had memorized, every hard lesson earned in jungles and deserts across 3 continents. When he opened his eyes again, the fear was gone, replaced by something colder, something precise. "Listen to me," he said, his voice cutting through the gunfire like a blade through silk. "We move as one unit, fluid, no hesitation. I taught you the pattern. Serpentine approach, controlled bursts, maintain centerline discipline. You trust me, we all go home." The Marines looked at him, young faces, too young, but they nodded. "On my mark." Brennan rose first, not running, flowing, his M16A1 up and ready, his body moving at a pattern that seemed almost choreographed. Left, right, forward, duck. His boots barely made sound on the broken pavement. Behind him, 6 Marines followed. Mirrors of his movement, extensions of his will. The enemy never saw them coming. Brennan cleared the first doorway with a burst of 3 rounds, dropped the hostile before the man could raise his AK-47, spun left, another target, 2 rounds, center mass. The Marine behind him moved right, covering the angle Brennan couldn't see. Perfect coordination. No wasted movement. This was what 14 years of experience looked like when it worked. They reached the compound in 4 minutes. 6 Marines, 0 casualties. Inside, they found the hostages. 3 American medical students, bound and terrified, huddled in a corner that smelled of concrete dust and fear. Brennan cut their bindings with his K-bar knife, his hands steady, his voice calm. "You're safe now. Stay behind us. Move when I move." But as they turned to leave, Brennan saw movement in the shadows. A figure, small, hunched, hands reaching towards something on the floor. Civilian or combatant? The question froze him for exactly 0.3 seconds. In combat, 0.3 seconds is an eternity. The figure straightened. Brennan saw the weapon too late. A Soviet-made Makarov pistol already rising, already aimed. He pushed Corporal Davies aside, felt the impact before he heard the shot. A punch to the chest that knocked the air from his lungs and sent him backward into the wall. The Kevlar plate stopped the first round. The second one found the gap under his arm. Standard body armor weakness. Every Marine knew it, including the shooter. Brennan hit the ground. Davies killed the shooter with a 3-round burst. Too late to matter. The last thing Captain James Brennan saw was the ceiling of a concrete room 9,000 miles from home. The last thing he thought about was a 21-year-old girl with his eyes and her mother's determination. The last thing he said, whispered into the radio that Davies pressed against his lips, was this: "Tell Alexis, master the fundamentals." Then the darkness came, and somewhere in North Carolina, a daughter who loved her father more than anything in the world would wake up the next morning and learn what a folded flag meant. 9 years later. Marine Corps Base 29, Palms, California, March 92. The desert stretched out in every direction, like an ocean made of sand and scrub brush and heat that turned the air into something visible. Alexis Brennan guided her Ford Bronco down the dirt road toward the main gate, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the M1911A1 pistol that sat in a holster on the passenger seat. The gun was her father's, engraved on the slide in small, precise letters, Semper Fi, JB. She was 30 years old, lean and compact, 5'7", 140 pounds of muscle scar tissue and controlled fury. Her hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. No makeup, no jewelry, except for the dog tags that would be given to her later, the ones that had hung around her father's neck in Grenada. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and cold and absolutely steady. 9 years ago, she had been a college student, pre-med at Chapel Hill, planning to become a doctor, following the safe path, the expected path. Then the Marines had knocked on her apartment door at 2 a.m. and handed her a folded flag, and her entire world had collapsed into a single burning question. Why? Why had her father died? Why had he hesitated? Why had 14 years of experience failed him in the moment that mattered most? She had dropped out of college the next week, walked into a recruiting office in Jacksonville. The recruiter had looked at her like she was crazy. "Ma'am, you don't look like the type." "What type is that?" "The type that survives boot camp." She had survived. More than survived. She had excelled, driven by something the other recruits didn't understand. A need to know, to master, to become better than good, better than excellent. To reach a level where hesitation was impossible because every response was programmed into muscle memory so deep it became instinct. 4 years as a rifleman, 3 years as a combat instructor, 2 years studying under the best close-quarters battle specialists in the Corps. Men who had served with her father, men who remembered Captain James Brennan and spoke his name with the kind of respect usually reserved for legends. They taught her everything they knew, and she learned. At 28, she had become the youngest female Marine to earn the Combat Master Instructor designation. At 30, she was being sent to 29 Palms to run an experimental training program. Co-ed combat units, mixed gender close quarters training, the kind of program that made half the Corps nervous and the other half actively hostile. The Pentagon wanted proof it could work. Alexis Brennan was the proof. She pulled up to the guard gate. A young corporal stepped out of the booth, squinting against the sun. He looked at her civilian clothes, jeans, and a faded USMC t-shirt and frowned. "Help you, ma'am." She handed him her orders, watched his expression change as he read. Military ID, transfer papers, security clearance high enough to make a corporal nervous. "Instructor Brennan," he said, his voice suddenly different, more careful. "Welcome to 29 Palms. Command's expecting you. Building 7, Colonel Ashford's office." She took her papers back, drove through the gate. Around her, the base sprawled out in organized chaos. Barracks, training facilities, vehicle depots, Marines everywhere, running, marching, carrying equipment. The machine of military readiness in constant motion. She parked outside Building 7, sat in the Bronco for exactly 30 seconds, letting her breathing settle. Letting the memories settle. Her father had served here once back in the 70s before Grenada, before everything. She picked up his pistol, checked the nap of the magazine out of habit. 7 rounds of .45 ACP, old school, reliable. The weapon that had won 2 world wars and countless smaller conflicts. The weapon her father had carried into his last firefight. She holstered it, got out of the truck, walked into Building 7 with her shoulders square, and her eyes forward and the weight of 9 years of preparation pressing down on her like gravity. The office was standard military issue. Gray walls, metal desk, American flag in the corner. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he had been carved from granite and left in the sun too long. 67 years old. Silver hair cut high and tight, face lined with decades of command decisions. Eyes that missed nothing. Colonel Vincent Ashford. He stood when she entered, saluted. She returned it. "Instructor Brennan," he said. His voice was like gravel rolling down a hill. "Sit." She sat. Ashford studied her for a long moment. Not the way some men studied women. This was assessment, calculation, the look of a commander deciding whether the asset in front of him was worth the investment. Finally, he spoke. "Brennan," he said slowly. "James Brennan's daughter." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "I commanded your father in Grenada, Operation Urgent Fury, October '83. He was the best close-quarters battle specialist I ever served with. Saved 6 Marines that night before he went down. You know how he died." "Hesitation, sir. 0.3 seconds. Civilian identification protocol. The hostile exploited the gap." Ashford nodded. "That's the official report. You know what I think?" "No, sir. I think your father was too good. Too precise. He followed the rules even when the rules were going to get him killed. There's a lesson in that, Brennan. Sometimes the fundamentals aren't enough. Sometimes you need something more." Alexis met his eyes, held them. "My father trained me from the time I could walk, sir. He taught me the fundamentals. Then I spent 9 years learning what comes after the fundamentals. I don't hesitate. Prove it. Give me the chance, sir." Ashford leaned back in his chair. The springs creaked. You're here to run an experimental program. 40 Marines fresh back from Desert Storm. They crushed the Iraqi army in 100 hours using overwhelming air superiority and technology. They think they're invincible. They think modern warfare has made close-quarters training obsolete. And half of them think a woman has no business teaching them anything. He paused. Let that settle. Let me guess, sir. You want me to change their minds. I want you to transform them into a functional unit in 3 weeks. Pentagon observers arrive on day 21 to evaluate the program. If you fail, they shut this down, and every female Marine in combat training gets pushed back to administrative roles. You're not just representing yourself, Brennan. You're representing every woman who wants to prove they belong in the fight. Alexis felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders, heavier than the pistol on her hip, heavier than the memories of her father's funeral. But she had carried heavy things before. I won't fail, sir. Your father said the same thing. The words hung in the air like a blade. Ashford stood, walked to the window, looked out at the desert training grounds where 40 Marines were running drills in the afternoon heat. Your unit is out there now. Staff Sergeant Declan Thorne is the ranking NCO. 25 years old, distinguished service in Desert Storm. Also, a grade A asshole who thinks women belong in support roles. He's going to test you, probably within the first 24 hours. How you handle him will set the tone for everything that follows. I'll handle him, sir. Ashford turned back to face her. And for just a moment, something shifted in his expression. The granite cracked. Underneath was something older, something that looked almost like regret. Your father saved my life in Grenada, he said quietly. He didn't hesitate then. He saw a grenade roll into our position, and he threw himself on top of me. Took shrapnel in the back. Didn't even slow him down. 2 hours later, he was dead because he hesitated for 0.3 seconds with a different threat. Combat is chaos, Brennan. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow rules. Your father was a hero and a casualty on the same night. Remember that. Alexis stood. I remember everything, sir. That's why I'm here. Ashford studied her one more time, then nodded. Dismissed, instructor. Go meet your unit. God help them. The training yard was a rectangle of hard-packed sand and scattered obstacles, pull-up bars, tire runs, rope climbs. And standing in formation, sweating in the California sun, were 40 United States Marines. Alexis walked toward them with measured steps. Not hurrying, not slow, just steady. The way her father had taught her to move. Deliberate, controlled. Every action intentional. The Marines noticed her immediately. Whispers rippled through the formation like wind through grass. That's the instructor. Looks like she weighs $120. This is going to be a joke. At the front of the formation stood a man who had to be Staff Sergeant Declan Thorne. 6'2", 200 pounds of muscle, blonde hair, square jaw, the kind of face that belonged on recruiting posters. He wore his uniform like armor, and his confidence like a weapon. Alexis stopped 10 feet in front of the formation. Let the silence build. Let them look at her. Let them make their assumptions. She had learned that people's assumptions were often their greatest weakness. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried. My name is Alexis Brennan. I'm your combat master instructor for the next 3 weeks. I'm here to teach you close-quarters battle techniques that will keep you alive when your technology fails, your air support doesn't arrive, and you're fighting an enemy in tight confines with no backup. She paused, met their eyes one by one. Some of you are wondering if I'm qualified. Some of you are wondering if a woman can teach you anything useful. Some of you have already decided I'm wasting your time. Another pause. Those of you who think that are going to learn something important in the next few weeks. You're going to learn what it feels like to be wrong. Declan Thorne stepped forward, not quite breaking formation, but enough to make his challenge clear. Ma'am, he said. The word carried just enough emphasis to make it an insult. With all due respect, we just returned from combat operations in the Gulf. We defeated the 4th largest army in the world in 100 hours. What exactly do you think you can teach us that actual combat hasn't already? Alexis looked at him, really looked at him, saw the pride, the certainty, the absolute conviction that his experience made him untouchable. She had seen that expression before, on the faces of instructors who had underestimated her, on the faces of Marines who thought women didn't belong in combat roles, on the faces of men who confused confidence with competence. Staff Sergeant Thorne, she said calmly, what's your hand-to-hand combat certification level? Expert, ma'am. Top marks in line training. Linear infighting. Neural override engagement. The Marine Corps' modern combative system. Good program. Effective. But predictable. Step forward, Sergeant. Thorne hesitated just for a second, then moved out of formation. The other Marines shifted, sensing something. The air changed, became electric. Show me your expert-level technique, Alexis said. Attack me. Full contact. Show these Marines what combat-tested skill looks like. Thorne smiled. Not a friendly smile. Ma'am, I don't want to hurt you. You won't. That got his attention. The smile faded, replaced by something harder. He glanced back at his fellow Marines, calculating. If he refused, he looked weak. If he attacked and somehow failed, he looked worse. But he couldn't imagine failing. Not against a woman who weighed 140 and looked like a strong wind might knock her over. He made his choice. Thorne came in fast. Textbook line technique. Left jab to create opening. Right cross following. Looking to overwhelm with speed and power. The kind of attack that worked on 90% of opponents. Alexis wasn't 90%. She shifted. Not a big movement. Just a half step left. Her body angled. Thorne's jab passed 2 inches from her face. His cross followed. She redirected it with her forearm, using his momentum, adding to it, guiding it past her center line. Thorne stumbled, off balance, just for a second. A second was all she needed. Alexis moved inside his guard, her hand locked onto his wrist. Pressure point, radial nerve. She applied exactly the right amount of force in exactly the right direction. And Thorne's entire arm went numb. His body followed his arm down. Natural response to sudden nerve disruption. He hit the sand hard enough to raise dust. 4 seconds, start to finish. The training yard went completely silent. Alexis released his wrist, stepped back. Thorne lay on the ground staring up at the sky, his brain trying to process what had just happened. Around them, 40 Marines stood frozen, mouths open, eyes wide. On your feet, Sergeant, Alexis said quietly. Thorne scrambled up, his face red. Whether from exertion or embarrassment, she couldn't tell. Probably both. That was a demonstration of fundamental principle number 1. She continued addressing the entire formation now. Superior technique defeats superior strength. You relied on power and speed. I relied on precision and leverage. In close quarters combat, precision wins every time. She turned back to Thorne. His jaw was clenched, his fists tight. She could see the anger building, the humiliation, the need to restore his reputation in front of his peers. You want another round, Sergeant? Yes, ma'am, he said through gritted teeth. Same result, she warned. I'm telling you right now, walk away, preserve your ego, learn the lesson. But Thorne was 25 years old and had just been embarrassed in front of 40 people. And pride is a terrible master. I wasn't ready, ma'am. Let's go again, Alexis sighed. All right, but this time bring friends. Make it interesting. Anyone in this formation who thinks they can take me step forward. 5 of you. Let's see what Desert Storm taught you about close quarters combat. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then a corporal stepped forward, then another, then 2 more. Young men, confident, veterans of a victorious war. They formed up around Thorne, 5 against 1. Somewhere in the back of the formation, a female Marine watched with wide eyes. Corporal Eleanor Sutherland, the only woman in the unit, 24 years old. She had been enduring comments and isolation and casual discrimination for 6 months. Now, she watched a female instructor face down 5 men, and her heart hammered in her chest with something that felt like hope. Rules, Alexis said. No strikes to face or groin, no permanent damage. But everything else is fair game. When you tap out or I put you on the ground, you're done. Understood. 5 nods. Begin. They came at her together, coordinated, not stupid. Thorne had at least taught them that much. Flanking positions, 1 from the front, 2 from angles. Looking to overwhelm through numbers and geometry. Alexis moved. Not fast, not desperate, just fluid. Like water, finding the gaps in a dam. She saw their attack pattern before they executed it. Saw the tells, the weight shifts, the eye movements, the 1,000 tiny signals that telegraphed intention. The Marine coming from the front rushed first. Big mistake. Alexis sidestepped, used his momentum, guided and passed her into the Marine attacking from the left. They collided, went down in a tangle of limbs and curses. 2 down. The Marine on her right grabbed for her arm, trying to control, trying to use his strength advantage. She let him grab her, then rotated her wrist, broke his grip using basic biomechanics. Locked his elbow. He yelped, tapped the ground. She released him instantly. 3 down. Thorne and one other Marine remained. They circled her, more cautious now. Learning. Good. But too late. Thorne feinted left. His partner moved right. Classic pincer. Alexis dropped low, swept the partner's front leg. He went down hard. Before he hit the ground, she pivoted to face Thorne. He was already moving. Desperation now. Pride. A wild haymaker that had power behind it, but no precision. Alexis blocked with her forearm, stepped inside his guard, delivered a palm strike to his solar plexus. Not hard, just enough. The air left Thorne's lungs in a rush. He doubled over. She guided him down, gently, almost kindly. 5 men, 90 seconds. Alexis stepped back, not even breathing hard. The Marines on the ground stared up at her with expressions that had transformed from confidence to shock, to something approaching awe. She helped Thorne to his feet, looked him in the eye. I warned you, Sergeant. Words matter. Discipline matters. Listening matters. You didn't listen, so I had to teach you the hard way. Do I have your attention now? Thorne swallowed, nodded. His face was the color of a fresh burn. Yes, ma'am. Good. That's the first step. She turned to address the formation. 40 pairs of eyes locked onto her. The whispers had stopped. The doubt had stopped. Something new had taken their place. Fear. Respect. The recognition that what they thought they knew about combat had just been challenged by a woman who weighed half what some of them did and had just dismantled their best fighters like they were children. I'm not here to embarrass you, Alexis said. Her voice carried across the training yard. I'm here to keep you alive. The techniques I just used were developed over decades of combat experience. Some of you think modern technology makes close quarters training obsolete. You're wrong. Technology fails. Communications fail. Air support doesn't always arrive. When that happens, all you have is your body, your mind, and your training. I'm going to give you training that works. When everything else has failed. She paused. Let that sink in. My father was Captain James Brennan. He died in Grenada in 1983. He was the best close-quarters specialist in the Marine Corps. He saved 6 lives the night he died. But he also made a mistake. He hesitated for 0.3 seconds. That hesitation killed him. I've spent 9 years making sure I never make the same mistake. And for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to make sure you don't either. In the silence that followed, a hand raised. The female Marine in the back, Eleanor Sutherland. Ma'am, she called out, can you teach us what you just did? Alexis looked at her, saw something familiar in the young woman's eyes. Determination, hunger. The same thing Alexis had felt walking into that recruiting office 9 years ago. That's why I'm here, Corporal. That's exactly why I'm here. Week 1, day 2. The alarm went off at 03:45. Alexis Brennan was already awake. She had been awake since 0300, the way she was always awake before dawn. The way her body had learned to function on 5 hours of sleep and controlled adrenaline and the knowledge that hesitation meant death. She dressed in the dark. Combat boots, utility trousers, USMC t-shirt, her father's M1911 A1 on her hip. By the time she walked out into the California desert night, the stars were still visible overhead, bright and cold and indifferent. The barracks were dark, silent. 40 Marines, sleeping off their first day of humiliation. She opened the door to Building 6 and hit the lights. On your feet, her voice cracked through the sleeping quarters like a rifle shot. Marines jolted awake. Confusion, anger. Someone swore. Alexis walked down the center aisle between the bunks, her boots hitting the floor in sharp measured beats. You have 4 minutes to be in PT formation outside. 4 minutes. Anyone not in formation runs an extra 5 miles. Move. Chaos erupted. Marines stumbling out of bunks, searching for boots, pulling on shirts. Declan Thorne sat up slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. He locked eyes with Alexis as she passed his bunk. This is harassment, ma'am, he said. Alexis stopped, turned, looked at him with those storm gray eyes that gave away nothing. No, Sergeant. This is training. You want harassment? I can arrange that too. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. She walked out. 4 minutes later, 38 Marines stood in formation. Declan Thorne and another Marine arrived at 4 minutes, 12 seconds. Alexis noted it without comment. Just pointed to the road that led out into the desert darkness. 5 miles, double time. Staff Sergeant Thorne and Private Fletcher lead. The rest of you stay together. Anyone falls out, everyone runs it again. Go. They ran. Alexis ran with them. Not in front, not in back, moving through the formation like a ghost. Appearing beside Marines who were struggling, matching their pace, her breathing steady while theirs came in ragged gasps. At mile 3, Private Fletcher stumbled, went down hard on the sand and gravel. The formation kept moving, leaving him behind. "Halt!" Alexis's voice cut through the darkness. 40 Marines stopped, turned, watched as Alexis jogged back to where Fletcher lay, clutching his ankle, his face twisted in pain. "Can you walk?" she asked. "I think so, ma'am." "Then get up, lean on me." She helped him to his feet, put his arm over her shoulder. A 140-pound woman supporting a 190-pound Marine. They hobbled back to the formation together. "Listen carefully," Alexis said to the assembled Marines. "In combat, you don't leave people behind. Ever." Fletcher fell. "That means we all failed. We run this again tomorrow, same time. And we keep running it until every single one of you crosses the finish line together. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." They finished the run, Fletcher limping, Alexis beside him, the formation moving at his pace, slower, painful, but together. When they returned to base, the sun was just breaking over the desert horizon, turning the sand gold and the sky the color of fire. Declan Thorne pulled Alexis aside as the formation dispersed. "Ma'am, that was a waste of time. Fletcher's weak. He should be cut from the program." Alexis looked at him, really looked at him, saw the certainty, the conviction that strength was all that mattered, the same conviction that got Marines killed when they abandoned teammates who couldn't keep up. "Sergeant in Grenada, my father, could have left 6 Marines behind and completed his mission alone. He would have survived. Instead, he stayed with them, moved at their pace, made sure they all extracted together. He died saving them. You think that was weakness?" Thorne's jaw clenched. "That's different, ma'am." "No, it's not. Strength isn't leaving people behind. Strength is making sure everyone comes home. You learn that, or you fail my program. Your choice." She walked away, leaving Thorne standing in the desert morning, his fist clenched, his pride burning like acid in his throat. Week 1, Day 4. The classroom was hot. 40 Marines sat at metal desks, sweating in the afternoon heat, watching as Colonel Ashford stood at the front beside a projection screen showing grainy photographs from another era. "East Germany, 1979, Ashford said, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "I was 32 years old, intelligence officer, operating in Soviet-controlled territory. My mission was simple. Don't get caught. Extract information. Survive." He clicked to the next image, a photograph of a younger Ashford in civilian clothes, standing on a gray street in a gray city that looked like hope had died there long ago. The Stasi were the best surveillance apparatus in human history. Cameras everywhere, informants everywhere. One wrong move and you disappeared into a concrete cell, so I learned to be invisible. Gray man tactics. Blend in. Move like you belong. Never stand out. Another click. An image of Soviet soldiers patrolling a checkpoint. Technology was different then. No cell phones, no GPS, no satellite communications, just tradecraft, human skill, the ability to read a situation and adapt faster than your enemy could respond. That's what kept me alive for 3 years behind the Iron Curtain. He turned to face the Marines. "Some of you think modern technology has made those skills obsolete. You're wrong. Technology fails. Batteries die. Satellites get jammed. Communications get intercepted. When that happens, all you have is your training and your brain. Instructor Brennan is going to teach you skills that don't require batteries. Skills that have kept warriors alive for thousands of years. Colonel?" Declan Thorne raised his hand. "With respect, sir, we just won Desert Storm, using overwhelming technological superiority. Air power, precision-guided munitions. We didn't need hand-to-hand combat." "We needed firepower." Ashford smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Staff Sergeant Thorne let me tell you about a Marine named James Brennan. Captain. Best close-quarters specialist I ever knew. Grenada, October 1983. We had air support. We had communications. We had technology. And Captain Brennan still died because in the moment that mattered, he was inside a concrete building with an enemy combatant and no backup. And all he had was his training. His training saved 6 Marines before it failed him. You think technology would have helped in that moment?" The classroom went silent. Ashford continued, his voice quieter now. "Captain Brennan's daughter is standing in this room. She has spent 9 years mastering what her father knew and going beyond it. She doesn't make his mistakes. She doesn't hesitate. You disrespect her, You disrespect him. You disrespect every Marine who ever died because their technology failed them. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Week 2, midnight. Alexis was in the training yard alone, moving through drills under the desert stars. Punches to invisible targets, kicks that snapped with controlled violence, grappling techniques practiced against the air. Her body flowed from stance to stance, muscle memory so deep it required no conscious thought. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. Private Harrison Ashford stood at the edge of the yard watching her. 22 years old, thin, uncertain, the opposite of his grandfather in every way that mattered. "Can't sleep, Private?" Alexis asked without stopping her movements. "No, ma'am. I keep thinking about the demonstration. How you moved. It was like you knew what Staff Sergeant Thorne was going to do before he did it." "I did know." She stopped, faced him. He telegraphed his intentions. Weight shift, eye movement, shoulder rotation. Most people don't see those signals. But if you train yourself to read them, combat becomes predictable. Harrison stepped closer, hesitant. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "How do you deal with fear? In the moment when it matters?" Alexis studied him, saw the genuine question beneath the words. The vulnerability. "You freeze sometimes, don't you?" she asked quietly. Harrison flinched, nodded. "In Desert Storm, I saw things. A civilian vehicle approached our checkpoint. We thought it was hostile. It wasn't. But by the time we realized, I froze. Couldn't move. Couldn't speak. One of my squad mates had to pull me down when the shooting started. If he hadn't, I'd be dead. PTSD. The medical officer says maybe. I don't know. I just know I freeze when I should act." Alexis was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a decision. "My father froze too," she said. "Grenada, 0.3 seconds. It killed him. For 9 years, I thought that meant freezing was failure. That I had to eliminate the pause completely. But I was wrong." Harrison looked up, surprised. "Freezing isn't failure, Private. It's assessment. Your brain processing threat levels faster than conscious thought can follow. The problem isn't the freeze. It's what happens after. Most people freeze and panic. But if you train correctly, you freeze, and then you act with perfect precision, because your subconscious has already calculated the correct response." She demonstrated. Stood in neutral stance. Someone attacks. She froze for exactly half a second, then exploded into motion, a devastating combination of strikes and blocks that would have ended any real threat. "See, I freeze. Then I act. The freeze is my advantage. It's the moment my training takes over." "But how do you train that? 10,000 repetitions." "You drill scenarios until your body knows the response before your brain finishes asking the question. Then the freeze becomes calculation instead of paralysis." Harrison's eyes widened. "Will you teach me?" Alexis smiled. Small, genuine. "That's why I'm here." For the next hour under the desert stars, she taught him basic responses to common threats, how to turn fear into focus, how to use the freeze as a decision point instead of a failure point. Harrison was clumsy at first, uncertain, but slowly he began to understand. Week 2, day 9. The confrontation came during afternoon hand-to-hand drills. Alexis had paired the Marines for practice. Eleanor Sutherland with another corporal, Harrison Ashford with a private his size. The drills were going smoothly until Declan Thorne walked over to where Harrison was struggling with a basic wrist lock. "Move," Thorne told the private. "I'll show the colonel's pet how it's really done." Alexis was across the yard working with another pair. She heard the commotion, turned, saw what was happening. "Staff Sergeant Thorne," she called out. "Stay with your assigned partner." Thorne ignored her, faced Harrison. "Come on, Ashford. Show me what the instructor taught you last night." "Let's see if private lessons help." Harrison's face went red. The other Marines were watching now. The implication was clear. Favoritism, special treatment, nepotism. "Sergeant," Alexis said, walking toward them. Her voice was ice. "Step away from Private Ashford, now." "Or what, ma'am? You going to put me on the ground again in front of everyone? Is that how you maintain discipline?" The training yard went silent. Every Marine stopped, turned. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The second confrontation. Thorne's attempt to reclaim his authority. Alexis stopped 10 feet away, looked at Declan Thorne with absolutely no expression on her face. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, conversational, somehow more terrifying because of it. "Staff Sergeant Thorne, you have 2 choices. Choice 1, you apologize to Private Ashford for implying he receives special treatment. You return to your assigned partner, and we continue training. Choice 2, you double down on your disrespect. I file an official complaint with Colonel Ashford and you spend the next 3 weeks on sanitation duty while the rest of your unit trains for the Pentagon evaluation. Your career ends here. Your choice. 10 seconds. Thorne's face went through several colors. Red, purple, something approaching gray. His fists clenched and unclenched. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to attack, to prove himself, to restore his damaged pride. But he wasn't stupid. He looked around the training yard, saw 40 Marines watching, saw Eleanor Sutherland with her arms crossed, waiting to see what he would do, saw Harrison Ashford standing straighter now, more confident. And he understood, in that moment, that Alexis Brennan had already won. "My apologies, Private Ashford," Thorne said through clenched teeth. "I was out of line." "Accepted," Harrison said quietly. Thorne turned and walked back to his partner without another word. The training yard exhaled. Marines returned to their drills. But something had shifted. Everyone felt it. The balance of power had changed. After training, Eleanor Sutherland found Alexis in the equipment room. "Ma'am, that was incredible. How did you know he would back down?" Alexis looked up from the gear she was inventorying. "Because Staff Sergeant Thorne is a bully corporal, and bullies only fight when they're certain they can win. I gave him a choice, where both options ended with him losing. He chose the option that hurt less. Have you been dealing with men like him your whole career?" "Every day, since I enlisted." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Then, how do you handle it?" "The disrespect. The assumption that you don't belong." Alexis set down the clipboard, gave Eleanor her full attention. "I prove them wrong. Every single day. I outwork them, outperform them, show them that gender is irrelevant when skill's absolute. Some of them learn, some of them don't. But all of them remember. I want to learn, ma'am. Everything you know. I'm tired of being invisible. Tired of being tolerated instead of respected. Then you'll train harder than everyone else. You'll master every technique I teach. And when someone like Thorne tries to diminish you, you'll have the skill to shut them down without saying a word. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Be here tomorrow at 0500, before the others. We'll start then." Eleanor left with something burning in her chest that felt like hope and determination in the beginning of transformation. Week 2, day 12. Colonel Ashford called the meeting in his office after dark. Present himself, Alexis, and the senior training staff. The topic, the field exercise scheduled for week 3. 48 hours, Ashford said, spreading a map across his desk. The Marines versus you and me. Desert warfare simulation. Non-lethal ammunition. Survival scenario. They hunt us. We evade and counterattack. At the end of 48 hours, we evaluate their performance. One of the staff officers frowned. "Sir, 2 instructors against 40 combat-trained Marines. That's not a fair fight." "Exactly," Ashford said. "Combat isn't fair. The enemy doesn't care about even odds. This exercise teaches them to think asymmetrically, to adapt when the situation is stacked against them." He looked at Alexis. "You ready for this?" "Yes, sir. But I want to add a condition. During the exercise, I want to simulate a casualty scenario. One of their Marines gets injured. Real injury, not simulated. Something minor, but requiring evacuation. Let's see how they handle it when the mission conflicts with caring for wounded." Ashford's eyes narrowed. "You want to test their priorities. I want to test whether they've learned. If they abandon a wounded Marine to complete the mission, they've learned nothing." One of the staff officers spoke up. "Ma'am, that's manipulative." "That's realistic," Alexis countered. "In Grenada, my father had to choose between completing his mission and saving 6 Marines. He chose the Marines. That choice saved lives and cost his own. I want to know if these 40 men and women will make the same choice." Ashford studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Approved. We'll stage it 12 hours in. Make it look organic." Later, walking back to her quarters under stars, so bright they seemed close enough to touch, she encountered Harrison Ashford sitting on the steps of the barracks. "Can't sleep again, Private." "No, ma'am. Thinking about the field exercise. Everyone's talking about it. Staff Sergeant Thorne says it's going to be his chance to prove you're not as good as you think." Alexis sat down beside him. "What do you think?" "I think Staff Sergeant Thorne doesn't understand who he's dealing with." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Harrison spoke again, quieter now. "Ma'am, why do you do this? You could have any assignment in the Corps. Why come here to teach Marines who don't respect you?" Alexis looked up at the stars. Thought about her father, about Grenada, about 9 years of training and sacrifice, and the burning need to make his death mean something. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Someone has to teach the lessons my father died learning. Someone has to make sure the next generation doesn't make the same mistakes. If I don't do it, who will?
Your father would be proud of you. Maybe. Or maybe he'd tell me I'm wasting my time trying to save people who don't want to be saved. Do you think that we don't want to be saved? Alexis looked at him, really looked at him, saw the earnestness, the vulnerability, the desperate desire to be better than he was. No, she said. I think some of you are ready to learn. The question is whether the others will drag you down before you get the chance. She stood.
Get some sleep, Private. The field exercise starts in 3 days. You're going to need your strength. As she walked away, Harrison called out, "Ma'am." She turned. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Alexis nodded once, then disappeared into the darkness. Week 3, Day 15, 0530. The desert before dawn was cold. Alexis stood at the staging area checking her gear one final time. Canteen. Compass. Map. Her father's M1911A1, loaded with marking rounds that would leave paint instead of holes. Minimal equipment. Maximum skill requirement. Beside her, Colonel Ashford did the same. 70 years old and preparing to spend 48 hours in the California desert, evading and counterattacking 40 Marines half his age. He caught her looking and smiled. "Having second thoughts about bringing an old man?" he asked. "No, sir. Having second thoughts about the Marines. They don't know what they're up against." Confidence. "Good. Your father had that too." "My father died, sir." "Yes. But he died buying time for others to survive. That's not failure, Brennan. That's leadership." Before she could respond, the Marines arrived. 40 of them in full combat gear. Faces painted, eyes hard. Declan Thorne at the front, looking like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. General Nathaniel Strand stood with the command staff watching, evaluating. Behind him, 2 analysts made notes. The Pentagon observers had arrived the previous evening. 3 black SUVs, 3 stars on Strand's shoulders. A reputation that preceded him like artillery fire. He had planned Desert Storm, had orchestrated the 100-hour ground campaign that crushed Iraq's army, had proven that modern warfare belonged to technology and overwhelming force. He did not believe in close-quarters combat training. He especially did not believe in female combat instructors. But he had promised to evaluate fairly. Ashford addressed the formation. "Listen carefully. The rules are simple. You have 48 hours to locate and capture Instructor Brennan and myself. We'll be somewhere in this 20-square-mile training area. You have radios, GPS, 40 people. We have experience and knowledge of terrain. Non-lethal ammunition only. If you're marked, you're out. If we're both marked, you win. If either of us remains unmarked after 48 hours, we win. Questions?" Declan Thorne raised his hand. "Sir, what happens if someone gets injured? Real injury, not simulated." "You make the call, Sergeant. Mission or medevac, your choice, your consequences." Thorne nodded, satisfied. "One more thing," Ashford continued. "General Strand will be observing from the field. Do not engage him. Do not interfere with his observation. Treat him as a neutral presence." "Understood. Yes, sir." "Good. You have your objective. We get a 30-minute head start. Then you hunt. Good luck, Marines. You'll need it." Alexis and Ashford walked into the desert. Disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, like ghosts. The Marines watched them go. Confident. Certain. 40 against 2. The odds were in their favor. Or so they thought. Day 16, hour 8. The sun was high and merciless when the first ambush hit. The Marines were moving in squad formations. Textbook. Proper dispersion. Radio communication. Everything by the manual. Declan Thorne commanded from the center, coordinating movement, feeling confident. They never saw the first trap. Alexis had set it 3 hours earlier. Simple. Effective. A tripwire connected to smoke grenades buried in the sand. When the lead Marine triggered it, thick purple smoke erupted, marking 12 Marines instantly. They were dead before they understood what happened. Chaos. Shouting. Marines diving for cover. Then the marking rounds came from 2 directions. Ashford from the north, Alexis from the east. Precision fire. Each round finding a target. 3 more Marines marked. 15 down in 20 seconds. Thorne screamed orders. Return fire, suppress, and maneuver. But by the time the Marines organized, Alexis and Ashford were gone. Vanished into the desert like they'd never been there. Thorne stared at the marked Marines. 15 out of 40. More than a third of his force eliminated in the first engagement. His face was the color of raw meat. "Regroup," he ordered. "Reform squads. Tighten dispersion. Watch for traps." 300 yards away, crouched behind a rock formation, General Strand spoke quietly into his radio. "Command, are you recording this?" "Yes, sir," came the response. "All observation drones are active." "Good. Make sure the Pentagon sees this. This is textbook asymmetric warfare.
He lowered the radio, thought about Desert Storm, about overwhelming force and technological superiority, about the certainty that modern warfare had evolved past individual skill.
And he thought about two instructors who had just decimated a force 3 times their size using nothing but terrain knowledge and patient preparation. Maybe he had been wrong. Maybe skill still mattered. Day 16, hour 14, night fell. The temperature dropped 30 degrees. The Marines made camp in a defensive perimeter, posting guards rationing water. They had lost 15 people and hadn't even seen their targets clearly. Morale was low. Declan Thorne sat apart from the others, studying a map by red-filtered flashlight, trying to predict where Alexis and Ashford would be, trying to regain control of a situation that had spiraled away from him. Eleanor Sutherland approached.
Staff Sergeant, the squad leaders are asking for guidance. Do we continue the search at night or wait for dawn? We wait, Thorne said. Moving at night gives them too much advantage. We consolidate, rest, resume at first light. Respectfully, Sergeant, that's what they expect us to do.
I didn't ask for your opinion, Corporal. Return to your position. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she saluted and walked away. 2 miles away, Alexis and Ashford sat in a shallow depression in the sand, invisible from more than 20 feet away. They had no fire, no light, just canteens of water and the cold desert night pressing down. They're learning, Ashford said. Slowly, but learning. Not fast enough, Alexis replied. Tomorrow we escalate. The injury scenario. Let's see what they prioritize. You're hard on them. War is harder. Ashford was quiet for a moment. Your father used to say the same thing, before Grenada, before he learned that being hard on people doesn't prepare them for losing friends. Alexis turned to look at him. Is that what happened? He got soft? No, he got human. Realized that keeping people alive mattered more than completing missions. That's why he stayed with those 6 Marines. Why he died saving them. He chose people over objectives, and it killed him. Yes, but it saved them. Sometimes that's the trade. Alexis looked up at the stars, thought about her father, about choices and consequences and the mathematics of sacrifice. Tomorrow, she said quietly, we'll see if they understand that. Day 17, hour 24. The second ambush came at dawn. The Marines were moving again, more cautious now, checking for traps. But Ashford had set this one differently. A fake trail. Boot prints in the sand leading to a rocky outcropping. The Marines followed confident they'd found their target's position. They found Alexis instead. She came from behind, silent, moving through their formation like a blade through water, marking rounds fired in controlled bursts. 4 Marines down before they even knew she was there. Declan Thorne spun around, saw her, finally, 20 yards away, clear shot. He raised his rifle. Alexis moved. Thorne fired, missed. She was already gone. Diving behind cover, he fired again. The round passed through empty air. She reappeared 30 feet to the left. Fired once. The marking round hit Thorne's chest plate, center mass. Perfect shot. He was dead. The staff sergeant commanding the exercise was out. For a moment, the Marines didn't know what to do. Their leader was eliminated. The chain of command broken. Then Eleanor Sutherland stepped forward. I'm senior. We split into 3 squads, 5, 5, and 9. The 9-person squad pursues Instructor Brennan. The 2 5-person squads flank wide and try to locate Colonel Ashford. We communicate every 15 minutes. Anyone makes contact, everyone converges. Move smart, move quiet. Assume they're watching everything we do. The Marines moved to comply. Discipline returning. Purpose restored. Watching from concealment, Alexis allowed herself a small smile. Finally, they were learning. Day 17, hour 30. The injury happened exactly as planned. Harrison Ashford's squad was moving through a narrow ravine when his boot caught on loose rock. He went down hard. His ankle twisted with an audible pop. Not simulated. Real. He screamed. His squad surrounded him immediately. 1 Marine called for the medic, but the medic had been marked out in the first ambush. They had basic first aid. Nothing more. Eleanor Sutherland arrived with her squad within minutes. Assessed the situation. Harrison's ankle was already swelling, possibly broken. Definitely requiring evacuation. Call for medevac, 1 Marine said. That disqualifies us, another argued. We failed the exercise. Everyone looked at Eleanor. This was the test. Mission or Marine, objective or brother, what mattered more? She thought about Alexis Brennan, about the lessons, about strength and priorities. and what it meant to be a Marine. She thought about Alexis helping Private Fletcher finish that 5-mile run, about refusing to leave people behind. She thought about Captain James Brennan choosing 6 Marines over his mission, over his life. Eleanor keyed her radio. "Command, this is Corporal Sutherland. We have a casualty requiring immediate evacuation. Private Ashford, ankle injury, possible fracture. Requesting medevac to our position." Silence on the radio. Then Colonel Ashford's voice, speaking for the first time since the exercise began. "Corporal Sutherland, be advised that calling for medevac will terminate the exercise. Your unit will be marked as failed. Confirm your request." Every Marine in the squad looked at Eleanor, waiting. 300 yards away, hidden behind a rise, Alexis lowered her binoculars, looked at Ashford. "They passed," she said. "Yes," Ashford replied. "They did." Eleanor's voice came through the radio firm and clear. "Request confirmed, sir. We don't leave Marines behind. Medevac requested." Ashford keyed his radio. "All Marines exercise terminated. Medical helicopter inbound." "Well done, Corporal Sutherland. You made the right call." 20 minutes later, the helicopter landed. Medics loaded Harrison Ashford. His ankle was sprained, not broken. He'd be fine in a week. As the helicopter lifted off, the remaining Marines gathered in a loose formation, exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, marked with paint and failure. Alexis and Ashford emerged from concealment, walked toward them. General Strand was already there standing with the Marines, his uniform somehow still crisp, despite 24 hours in the field. Alexis addressed the formation. "You failed the tactical objective. You didn't capture us. You lost more than half your force. By the metrics of the exercise, you lost."
She paused. "Let that settle. But you succeeded at something more important. When faced with choosing between mission and Marine, you chose Marine. Corporal Sutherland, you could have left Private Ashford and continued. You didn't. That decision defines you as a leader." She looked at each of them, saw the transformation. 2 weeks ago, they had been arrogant, certain, untouchable. Now they were humbled, tested, aware. "In Grenada," Alexis continued, "my father faced the same choice. Mission or Marines. He chose Marines. It cost him his life, but those 6 men survived. They went home to families. They lived full lives. My father's death bought that. And I will never call that failure." The Marines stood straighter. Something had changed in them. Something fundamental. General Strand stepped forward. "Instructor Brennan, I came here skeptical. I believed modern warfare had evolved past the need for close quarters training. I was wrong." He turned to the Marines. "I watched you for 24 hours. I saw you make mistakes. I saw you learn from them. I saw Corporal Sutherland make a decision that contradicted tactical objectives, but honored Marine Corps values. That's what training should produce. Not robots, not tacticians, but leaders who understand that people matter more than plans." He looked back at Alexis. "Your program has my full endorsement. The Pentagon will receive my recommendation for expansion." Alexis saluted. "Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. You earned it. You and every Marine who refused to leave a brother behind." Day 21. Final evaluation. The ceremony was formal. Parade grounds, dress uniforms, flags snapping in the desert wind. The 40 Marines stood in formation. Despite everything they had endured, they stood proud. General Strand presented the unit commendation. Exceptional readiness certification. Official Pentagon approval. Declan Thorne, standing in formation with a humility that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago, watched as Alexis Brennan received her own commendation. Combat Instructor of Excellence. After the ceremony, he approached her. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was different, quieter. "I owe you an apology. I disrespected you. I disrespected your father's memory. I disrespected everything the Marine Corps stands for. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Alexis looked at him, saw genuine contrition, growth, change. "Apology accepted, Sergeant. Now take what you learned and teach it to others. That's how you make this right." "Yes, ma'am, I will." He saluted. She returned it. He walked away a different man than he had been 3 weeks ago. Eleanor Sutherland was next. She handed Alexis a small package. Inside was a custom unit patch. Brennan's Warriors, 29 Palms, 1992. "We all contributed," Eleanor said. "We wanted you to know what you built here, what you gave us." Alexis felt something unexpected. Emotion, pride, the sense that maybe finally her father's death had meaning beyond grief and loss. "Thank you, Corporal. This means more than you know." Later, as the sun set over the desert, Harrison Ashford found her alone at the training yard. His ankle was wrapped, but he was walking without crutches.
He handed her an envelope. "Don't read it now," he said. "Save it for when you doubt yourself, for when you wonder if this matters." Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Instructor Brennan, you taught me that freezing isn't failure. It's the moment before precision. You taught me that fear is assessment, not weakness. You taught me that leaving people behind is the only real failure. My grandfather told me about your father, about Grenada, about the choice he made. You carry his legacy, but you've made it your own. Thank you for not giving up on the invisible soldier. Semper Fidelis, Private Harrison Ashford. Alexis read it twice, folded it carefully, put it in her breast pocket next to her father's photograph. Colonel Ashford found her there an hour later. "You're leaving tomorrow," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. Reassignment to Quantico, senior instructor position." "They're lucky to have you. These Marines were lucky to have you." "I was lucky to have them, sir. They taught me as much as I taught them." Ashford was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A set of dog tags, old, worn, engraved with a name and service number. Brennan James D. Captain, USMC. "These were recovered from your father's body in Grenada," Ashford said quietly. "I've kept them for 9 years, waiting for the right moment to pass them on. I think that moment is now." Alexis took them with shaking hands, felt the weight, the history, the connection to a man she had loved and lost and spent 9 years trying to honor. "He would be proud of you," Ashford said. "Not because you didn't make his mistakes, but because you took his sacrifice and made it mean something. You've trained dozens of Marines who will train hundreds more. His lessons will echo forever. That's legacy, Brennan. That's immortality." Alexis couldn't speak, could only nod, could only stand there in the desert sunset, holding her father's dog tags and feeling the weight of everything she had built and everything she still had to build. Ashford saluted her one final time, then walked away, leaving her alone with the memory of her father and the promise of warriors yet to come. That night, Alexis stood alone at the training yard one final time. The desert wind carried the smell of creosote and sand. Somewhere in the barracks, 40 Marines slept. Tomorrow they would deploy to new assignments, carry her lessons to new units, teach others what she had taught them. She pulled out Harrison's letter. Read it again by moonlight. Her father had never given up either. On the 6 Marines in Grenada. On the Marines he'd trained before that. On her even when she was too young to understand what he was teaching. She looked at his dog tags in her other hand, felt the worn metal, the engraved name. "I didn't give up, Dad," she whispered to the desert night. "I never will." Somewhere above the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent, eternal. But down here in the sand, and heat, and blood, and sacrifice, something had changed. 40 Marines who would never forget. One instructor who had finally found peace, and a legacy that would echo long after the desert wind erased their footprints. Alexis Brennan walked back to her quarters. Tomorrow she would leave for Quantico, but tonight she had honored her father's memory. Master the fundamentals. She had, and the fundamentals would save lives for generations to come. 6 months later, September 1992, Somalia, Mogadishu. Operation Restore Hope was just beginning, and Staff Sergeant Declan Thorne was leading his squad through urban streets that smelled like gunpowder and fear and approaching chaos and ambush. Hostile fire from 3 buildings. His squad pinned down. Thorne didn't panic, didn't freeze. He remembered. Fluid movement. Centerline control. Use terrain. Adapt. He moved his squad using techniques Alexis Brennan had taught. Flanking maneuvers, suppressive fire, calculated aggression. They extracted without casualties. That night, he sat in a dusty compound and wrote a message on official Marine Corps stationery. "Instructor Brennan, your lessons just saved 9 lives in Mogadishu. Thank you. Semper Fi. Staff Sergeant Declan Thorne, Marine Scout Sniper School. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Corporal Eleanor Sutherland became the first female graduate in the program's history." During her graduation speech, she spoke about a female instructor who had taught her that strength transcends gender. That skill defeats assumption. That persistence breaks barriers. The commandant of the school asked for Alexis Brennan's contact information, wanted to discuss expanding female integration. The ripple spread. Quantico, Virginia, October 1992. At Marine Corps Base, Quantico, Alexis Brennan stood before a new class, 60 Marines, mixed gender. skeptical faces. One cocky lance corporal in the front row looked her up and down and smirked. "Ma'am, respectfully, what can you teach us that we don't already know?" Alexis smiled. The same calm smile she had given Declan Thorne 6 months ago. The same smile her father had probably given skeptical Marines 20 years ago. "I warned the last class," she said quietly. "They didn't listen at first. They learned. Will you?" She touched the dog tags hanging around her neck. Her father's tags, the weight of legacy and sacrifice and lessons learned in blood. The classroom was silent, waiting, ready. And Alexis Brennan began to teach. Her voice carried across the classroom with perfect precision. "Legends aren't loud. They're precise. They don't demand respect. They earn it. And they echo forever." She paused. Let it settle. "My father was a legend. Not because he was perfect, but because he chose people over objectives. That choice cost his life. But it saved 6 Marines who went home to their families, who raised children, who lived full lives. That's not failure. That's the highest form of success." She looked at each face, saw the doubt begin to crack, saw curiosity replace skepticism. "For the next 12 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to make the same choice. How to be warriors who fight with skill and lead with humanity. How to be legends worth echoing." She walked to the training mat at the front of the classroom. "Who wants to go first?" A hand raised, then another, then 10 more. They were ready to learn. The lance corporal who had smirked stood up. "Ma'am, I volunteer." "Good," Alexis said. "Step forward. Show me your best technique." He came at her with confidence, with certainty, with the absolute conviction that he knew what he was doing. 4 seconds later, he was on the ground, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what had just happened. The classroom erupted, not with laughter, with recognition. The understanding that they were in the presence of something real, something tested, something forged in grief and sacrifice and 9 years of relentless preparation. Alexis helped the lance corporal to his feet. "That's lesson 1, she said to the class. "Never underestimate your opponent based on appearance. Gender doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter. What matters is skill, precision, and the willingness to do what's necessary when it matters most." She turned to address the class. "My father hesitated for 0.3 seconds in Grenada, October 1983. That hesitation killed the best close-quarter specialist in the Marine Corps. For 9 years, I thought the lesson was to never hesitate, to eliminate the pause completely. I was wrong." She demonstrated, stood in neutral stance, froze for half a second, then exploded into devastating motion. "The freeze isn't failure. It's assessment. It's your brain calculating threat response faster than conscious thought." The key is what comes after the freeze. Panic or precision. Chaos or control. For the next 12 weeks, I'm going to train your bodies to choose precision every single time. The class leaned forward, fully engaged now. The skepticism was gone, replaced by hunger, the desire to learn, to become better. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher over Quantico. In Mogadishu, Declan Thorne was teaching her techniques to his squad. At Camp Lejeune, Eleanor Sutherland was proving that a woman could outshoot any man in her class. In barracks and training yards across the world, Marines were learning lessons that had begun in a concrete room in Grenada, October 1983. The ripple would never stop. The echo would never fade. Alexis touched her father's dog tags one final time, felt their weight, their promise, their completion. In Grenada, Captain James Brennan had hesitated for 0.3 seconds. That hesitation had killed him. But it had also taught his daughter the most important lesson of all, that warriors are not defined by their deaths, but by what they leave behind. He had left her, and she was leaving this. An endless chain of warriors who understood that people mattered more than missions, that brothers were worth dying for, that the fundamentals mastered and passed forward were the only immortality that mattered. She began the class, her voice carried across the room with perfect precision. Not her father's voice, her own, but carrying his truth forward into a future he would never see but had made possible. Master the fundamentals. She had. And now, standing before 60 Marines who would teach 600 more, who would teach 6,000 more, she understood what her father's last words had really meant. The fundamentals were not techniques. They were choices, values, the decision to stay when you could run, to save when you could survive, to teach when you could rest. Captain James Brennan had mastered those fundamentals in the last 0.3 seconds of his life. His daughter was mastering them every day after. And the echo would never end.